Welcome everyone. We're in the session for Enhancing Technology Innovation through Diversity of Thought with Liz Coulter. I'm pleased to introduce Liz to you. She represents the University of Auckland as co-host of THETA and is chair of the program committee. She has more than 28 years experience working in IT in a variety of disciplines and industries in Australia, the UK and New Zealand, both from a strategic and operational perspective. In the last 15 years, Elizabeth has worked in the higher education at University of Queensland and as the Director of Information Technology Services at the University of Auckland, and actively participates in the Australian and New Zealand IT communities. For the past 2 years, Liz has supported the Women in IT conference at Auckland University, where she invites IT professionals, academics, students and alumni for day-long discussions on mentoring, diversity and encouraging more young people to consider a career in ICT. Please join me in welcoming Liz to the stage.
Thank you very much, and I'm really pleased that we have a few men here today, although we do have men on this side and women on this side, so I'm not sure what that says. But we will talk about diversity generally, not just gender balance, although that's the key area I focus on. So why am I interested in diversity? Why are other people interested in diversity? I thought I'd just do a little bit of my background and why I'm where I am now. I had a very strong family influence, and this, you'll see how relevant this is throughout the talk, but a very strong family influence. My father was one of the first programmers in Australia. He brought Ethernet to Australia. He started AusCert, which was originally called CERT. So a very big background and influence there on IT. My mother was a ballerina, and when I left school I wanted to be a choreographer. But my mother influenced me that I should actually do IT and follow in my father's footsteps. And that's very key, because it's often a mentor or a mother figure who has the biggest influence on women and doing IT and getting that gender balance right. I also got a very strong family who are very much into engineering and economics. I went to all-girls school, which actually had a computer. We did the punch cards. It was quite a long time ago, and you had to do your little punch cards, put them in, get everything back the next day that someone else talked about. It's amazing, all the IT I grew up with is now in a museum. Makes me think I'm actually a lot older than I am. And when I went to uni, I was one of 13 women out of 300 at the University of Queensland. So I studied amongst a lot of male counterparts. There was all the IT that I grew up with, as I said. It's now in museums. But why am I interested in diversity now? Why have I got a strong focus on it? What I found is I was in Queensland, and they've got a very strong women in IT. And when I came over to Auckland, they didn't have that strong women in IT organisation here. They have it to some level, but not as strong as they have it in Australia. And I thought we were doing okay. I was the Director of IT Services at a university, and these senior women came to me and said, if you don't do something, we're going to go. Because the men in this organisation have a real stereotype and they don't respect our knowledge in IT. And I thought, right, I've actually got to be a bit more proactive and support gender balance, support women, because one of the things you don't want is to have your best women leaving an organisation. And hence, from that, myself with Linda Clements, who's head of the entertainment committee for THETA, she and I set up a Women in IT seminar, which is now gets people, women and men, from the New Zealand universities and polytechnics coming along once a year for a big seminar. Plus we have mentoring sessions for the professional staff at the university. But that's why I felt I needed to take a leadership role. I needed to do something. I couldn't just stand back. And from there I did a lot of research, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. Why is diversity important? And not just gender balance, but diversity as age, ethnicity, all sorts of areas are important when you talk about diversity, multiculturalism. And they all achieve greater, it gives you greater diversity of thought and innovation. If you've got a group that's diverse, if you've got all the same group thinking the same way, you're not going to get that diversity of thought. This morning, Michelle Dickinson mentioned the males who invented the car crash, the pillow. And that is a prime example of they didn't have that diversity of thought when they were doing that development. I was at a course a few weeks ago and they made a very good point. If you're developing something, you should have a team representative of the customer who you're supplying for. And therefore, you really need to look at how you support diversity. It improves problem solving. You're getting different ideas coming forward. Improves productivity, expands the qualified employee pool. If you try to get more people doing IT, more people into the mix. Reflects diverse customer bases, as I mentioned, and it's known and research has shown that it improves the bottom line. So this is EDUCAUSE. They've recently done a lot of work around diversity and why diversity matters. And again, they repeat it helps creativity, productivity, and innovation. And it's very important to see that we need diversity in a number of areas, including age, as well as other areas of equity, as well as ethnicity, I can never say it, ethnicity, gender, and I think some really important statistics here is around the number of people here, and around, I think there's something here about, there's a huge percentage. If you can get a diverse multicultural group, it can increase your revenue base incredibly. Like, I can't remember what the percentage was. It should be up there somewhere. But gender, not as much as multiculturalism, but they're still all important in increasing your return on investment. At the University of Auckland, we did measure not just gender balance, but also we looked at what different multiculturalism multicultural groups we had in our organisation, because we also wanted to see that we're getting diversity in other areas, not just in gender balance. But I'm going to focus on women in IT, because that's the area I know the most. And in New Zealand, the National Advisory Council states that it's vital for New Zealand's economic future for women to be fully participate in innovation. We also, from a few years ago, the senior manager in IBM mentioned that Australia's economic success depends on making the most of the country's human capital. And there's been lots of reports saying that this is really important, that we do need to engage our whole community in innovation and not just those who seem to be interested. We need to engage more people to help create an innovative country. The first statement from the top here came from a talk from Daryl Kolb on the other day. He spoke about how robots might take all our jobs, but this statement was from Australia. If we don't innovate successfully, we're toast. I thought that was quite good. And also I was reading something from Gartner the other day that higher education, they did a survey, and higher education is last in the percentage of digital top performers across 13 main industries, which means we need to do something to improve innovation, to increase our performance, and to be the top of the industries, not at the bottom, which is quite surprising actually when you look at higher education. That's where all the innovation comes from. So we do have a gender balance problem, and it is recognised internationally that it's something that does need to be focused on in the IT industry. And if this is a graph of international numbers, and we have 31% of women in IT compared, and engineering is a little bit worse, but that shows that the stem cells and all the stem cells STEM areas, we need to really do something about it. But it's even worse when you look at the developed countries. it's getting worse. They're getting lower. So while we've got these programs to increase women in IT, there is something going wrong because the number of women in IT is reducing, not increasing. And if you look at the UK, 18%, I saw somewhere that it's dropped to 16. They're just getting lower. In Australia, a few years ago when I first did this presentation, it was at 24%, and now it's at 20%. Women in IT in New Zealand has stayed about the same, around the 24.5% mark. But we've got to do something more, and we've got to work out how these programs that we're trying to put in place across the different countries can actually hit the mark, and what can we do in higher education to help with that. Universities, though, are doing a little bit better than the national trends. So in New Zealand, it's at 26%, and in Australian universities, it's 24%. I gave a similar talk to Court last year, and they decided they would start measuring the number of women in IT at the different universities. Hence, we now have the figures, so we can have a look at can we improve this. And if you look at the statistics from New Zealand, and it's very similar to Australia, most of the areas where there's fewer women are all the very technical areas. And even if you looked at ITS at the University of Auckland, I would have groups of very technical areas where there were no women. Security, architecture, networking. Oh, there was actually, we did end up having one woman in networking. But it's really something that we have to look at. This is also statistics from Court, from the measurements, looking at CIOs. And if we look in Australia, the Australian CIOs, there's 16% female. So while at the universities you've got, I think it was 24% in the whole, generally across the IT areas, at the CIO level it's at 16%. I probably haven't helped that stats because I've just left the University of Auckland. But in New Zealand, we're now down to 1 in 7, 15% in the UK. Canada is looking good at 25%, but South Africa is 4%. So obviously, internationally, we need to do something. And of course, you can't have a slide on balance and diversity without talking about pay equity, and there's always something we can do on pay equity. But I'm not going to go into that. It's more about innovation. How can we innovate? What does having more diversity, not just gender diversity, but all diversities, how can that help us to create a better organisation and create innovation? So there is an ICT job fall, and there is a gap. So how are we going to fill that gap? 10,000 shortfall of skilled IT staff over the next 3 years in New Zealand. And tertiary systems don't produce enough IT people. In Australia, there's going to be a gap of 10,000. Europe, 800,000. So there's no shortage of jobs. And I know we heard from Daryl the other day talking about how the robots are going to take all our jobs. We need something to take up this gap. There is a bit of a gap in the IT industry. So how does having women support innovation, or any diversity support innovation and benefit your organisation? And this could apply if for female-dominated areas that then have males as well. You want a mix. You don't want all women either. So research has shown that increases return on investment, and that you get better results even if you add just one woman into a team, which is good. It also powers innovation. So the London Business School found that with having 50% more women, you had better safety, there was self-confidence was optimal at 60%, team experimentation was optimal at 50%, team efficiency was optimal at 50%. So why wouldn't you do it? I mean, there's all these great benefits. US patents were more successful when you had women involved. So there's a lot of benefits into why, and it's not just women, diversity. Where you have diversity, it's beneficial. Now, these photos that I've got in here are of Auckland, so I just thought I'd add these in just so you get an experience of Auckland while you're here. So what are the issues? First of all, the girls. How do we influence our young girls to take up ICT? Apparently it's about mothers. It's about the influence of the parents. And you heard Michelle Dickinson say this morning that she was doing the workshop and the mother walked past and said, no, you know, girls don't do that. Well, that is not uncommon. I've spoken to many people who, and even my relatives who go, oh no, my daughter's not going to do IT, and I'm speaking to my niece going, yes you are, yes you are. People who do IT have good role models, and that's where my father came into play. He was a role model. He influenced me on the IT. You need to, the middle school time is a critical time for girls to get interested, and they need to have it in a positive and non-aggressive environment, and they need to be exposed to it as a natural thing, not something that's different that a girl does. It's not seen as an attractive career for women. There's these long-held beliefs of what IT is, and sorry guys for the stereotype here. I know not all of you are like this, and this is a generalisation as well. So be aware that, you know, different people have different ways in which they operate and different personality types within male and female gender types. But it's very hard to recruit girls into the IT area. And not only that, once you get the girls in and you go to uni, then there's a stereotype problem that could cause them to drop out of uni and think, okay, I'm going to do something else. But then finally they're in there, their career is advancing, and the quit rates for women in IT are quite high. Their engineering's high as well, and so is science. But look at technology, at 56% dropout rate of women in IT in their mid-careers. If we can try and do something to stop that, then that would help feed more gender balance within an organisation. About 220,000 highly qualified women would return to the labour market. This is based on an American survey. If we could somehow retain the women and stop them leaving in middle age. So why do women leave? Unconscious bias, and I'll go into a little bit more about that, because that's very key. Feeling isolated in their role. Supervisory relationships. Actually, it's a well-known research fact that a lot of people leave due to their direct supervisor. Promotion processes and competing life responsibilities. There's some stat out saying that most women, I think it was a very high percentage of women have a husband who also works, but of men who work, their wives, there's a much lower percentage of their partners actually working as well. So it's a different dynamic with women in the workforce and careers. So what can we do about it? There are quite a few Australian initiatives operating. So the Australian Computer Society is doing a lot and has always done a lot around women in IT, providing education, Go Girl, internships, trying to change girls' perspective of ICT. They visit schools, and there's a new Rails for Girls program. They do mentoring, and I saw a great one from Victoria Uni. I want to do this. Champagne and coding. That's for me. I might have to pop over. And coding for girls. So they are doing a lot to try and do something about it. In New Zealand, there's very similar initiatives. I don't know if you saw Mind Lab speak at the conference. They do a lot of work with doing robotics and teaching girls programming and robotics. Nano Girl, you heard her this morning. So there is a lot that's happening in New Zealand as well. We do have, I actually don't mention it here, but we've got a couple of people or women in senior leaders in IT who they actually go and they've created a conference for mothers. So to try and target the mothers being involved and accepting that girls can do ICT. So that's a great initiative that they've undertaken. I look at how universities are changing, and when you look at the whole change of what we're doing around agile and multidisciplinary teams, if you think about that, that will help support innovation, and that's why agile teams are innovative, because suddenly you've got multidisciplinary teams, and you've got people from different areas, such as the library, working with IT. So librarians have more women in IT. Not women in IT, sorry, women in librarians, or you have a business area which will have women bringing them into an IT type of process. And so the whole work around Agile and why it creates innovation is because you're getting those multidisciplinary teams and you're getting that different areas of thought. And so it's important to try and look at, when you're developing those Agile teams, to do that rather than trying to keep to a norm, and try and get diversity in all areas in your Agile teams. So actually what other things you can do, other interventions are the recruitment and selection process. It is known fact that women, and this is a generalisation, so I know a few guys who have taken offence at this, but women will look at a list, a dot point list of things, and go, I can do this, 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 oh, I can't do that. I can do 80% of that, and so I'll go for the job. A woman who can do 80% will look and go, I can only do 20% and won't apply for the job, even though they could probably do 100%. So it's really important to watch that dot points. Watch how you advertise jobs. Watch how you word things so that people don't take themselves out of the running. The other thing that's quite controversial, I talk about you've got to tap someone on the shoulder. Now, you tap a male on the shoulder as well as a female, but a female who's would be good at the job won't apply for it necessarily unless they're tapped on the shoulder and given the confidence to go for that particular job. Now, they still have to be interviewed like everyone else. There's still a playing field that they have to be on, and that brings in all other areas around ensuring we don't have unconscious bias and other things. But it is something to remember that if a woman won't think, I'll automatically move from my job. There you go. Unconscious bias is quite important. This, Jen, is the internet. This happened to me in a number of my jobs. I walked into my job at the University of Auckland, and I've got a technical background. I'd implemented networks. I came from the University of Queensland. My previous boss is over there. And I got asked, do you know what a router is? And I went, yeah. And there was quite a while where people assumed that I didn't know much about IT. Whereas then a guy would walk into the room that they didn't know, and they would assume automatically they did. So there is this unconscious bias that you do have to watch. And unconscious bias is there, and it's unconscious. People don't realise they've got it. So there's a lot of research to show that it's important that people do training in unconscious bias so they can understand that they do have an unconscious bias. And we all do. I've got one. We all have, or not just one, we all have unconscious biases. And we just need to be aware of those when we're interviewing and when we're engaging. The other one is CVs. I don't know if you all know about this, but there's proven research and a lot of research where they've had the same CV, they put a male name at the top, and an interview panel will go, oh, they look fantastic, we'll interview them. You put a female name at the top, and they'll go, oh, they look a bit bossy. No, we won't take them on board. So what was interesting I saw from the UK is that the government has backing name-blind CVs, so that doesn't come into play. So I thought that was quite an interesting research or outcomes from a survey that was done recently. So we do need to reduce, and we can actively ourselves in our everyday work look at how we can reduce that unconscious bias and our recruitment and improve our recruitment and selection processes in how we announce jobs, how we interview. There's the National Centre for Women in IT in the US. I would recommend, if you want to look at some really practical ways to improve gender diversity, and I would say this just doesn't apply to gender diversity, I think it applies to all diversity. I would recommend this site because it's got very practical ways to make improvements. I'm not going to show this video, but I did just want to bring it up, and I suggest you all have a look at it. It's a great video on unconscious bias. And I think it is it's interesting to go through this video. It's 14 minutes, so that'll take a little while to go through. But it is a very good awareness video. And as I said, training on unconscious bias is extremely important. One of the last things I did before I left the university was do the year's operational plan, and unconscious bias training was there on the plan. So I left them with a legacy. I do often get these questions from the men in the audience, so maybe not you, but males at work. Why treat women differently? We are above the average in our percentage, so what does it matter? Isn't that good enough? There aren't enough people in the pool anyway, so why try getting any more? And where are the men in IT events? And I get that one. And what about other diversity? And these are really good points, and I think why treat women differently? Well, it's around all minorities. We need to address the minority issues in gender diversity and in multiculturalism. We do need to create that diverse base to create innovation of thought, to create different ways of thinking. And we also need to, when they say, oh, but we're average, I look at other companies that are 50% women and go, well, can't we just steal from someone else? You know. But then how do you also encourage people using Agile to be brought into the IT group? And that does create some ways to move people from different industries into the IT area. So, and the men in IT events, well, you always have to invite the men to the women in IT events, always have, and I think it's important to do so. And men in IT events, well, that's every day. So really. What's really important is male advocacy. And I won't go through these steps, but I'm very pleased to see there's a couple over there, all the males here today, because it is you that makes the difference. There's 24% women, so there is 76% men. And it's the 76% men that can make the difference. The same with all other diversity. If you look at the stats, it's those who are in the majority who can make the difference. The minority can try to be heard, but it's the majority who can actually do something about it and make that difference. So male advocacy is very important. And there's, in my presentation, you can look at the list. So this is about diversity generally, and it also applies to women in IT. So I think it's extremely important. The last but not least, measure it. If you don't measure it, you won't improve it. So very important to measure it, and I was glad when Quartet took up the opportunity to measure women in IT. And finally, with a claim from Helen Clark, if your aim is nothing, you'll hit it every time. You always have to have a goal and be working towards a goal. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz. So we've got a couple of minutes just for some questions, if anyone had any burning questions of Liz. All right.
So you're all going to go away and create diverse, innovative teams. Help discover. I've got some URLs there. So the government website has a few initiatives. Where else? We advertise the University of Auckland Women IT seminars. But the government website's pretty good. Especially the government website's really good here in New Zealand and in Australia. Australia is very state-based, so it's about going to your state-based area, other than the ACS, which does the whole. Yep. Yeah, so it's got the opposite. You do need to take that into account. We measure Marion Pacific, but we don't know who they are, and I might not know who that Marion Pacific team is, people in our group. So I think it's about making that anonymous. You know, at the University of Auckland, we measure that for every faculty and every group. We measure how many people from Marion Pacific, different cultures. And that's true, and they need to disclose it. And that's also tricky, because someone said to me, what about, should we be measuring gay and lesbian? Should we be measuring, what should we be measuring? And I said, well, it depends.